Hi everyone. So I will be talking about standardized testing. More specifically, the benefits and positive aspects of these types of assessments. Um, and I know that standardized testing and testing in general can spark a lot of thoughts, opinions, and controversy, especially because we've all been through it at some point and had to take some form of standardized assessment in our educational career. But I really wanted to just focus on the facts that I found and discuss why standardized testing plays an important role in education and how it can actually help academic success and achievement. So, again, I will be discussing the pros side of standardized testing for this module. Um, so, a quick definition: standardized tests are any test that is administered, scored, and interpreted in a standard, predetermined manner. And this definition was provided by W. James Popham, who was the former president of the American Educational Research Association. And this definition highlights the key concept of standardized testing, which is consistency. And in other words, standardized tests is when every student takes the same test under the same conditions and is scored in the same way. A very common way that we see standardized testing is multiple choice exams, since this format of tests ensures that all students are asked the same question in the same way and they're given the same opportunity to get the correct answer, since the potential answers are all laid right out in front of them. It's also important to note that in modern times, our standardized testing for multiple choice, we use Scantrons. So the grading process of multiple choice assessments is completely taken out of teacher and human error because we often use those Scantrons where a machine is just purely marking the answer a student put down and whether or not it matches the answer key that was made for that assessment. And because of that, the grading is objective and based on just predetermined answers where it can ensure fairness and eliminate any personal biases. There are other types of standardized testing. We've all done it. The New York State exams, state testing exams that we've done, we've had to write and you read and you interpret and answer questions in that way. It's just a very common thing to see those multiple choice, and it's an easy way to understand how an assessment is objective and standard in that way. And tests like this can provide clear, measurable ways to assess student knowledge, making it a very valuable tool. So to discuss where standardized testing came from, it has been in American education since about 1838, so a long time ago. It picked up some traction in 1926 with the development of the SAT, which was used for college admissions, just as it is for us now. And it was used to have a non-biased way of looking at these college applicants based purely on what they know academically and completely eliminating socioeconomic status and race from admissions decisions. And standardized testing became most popular in 2002 when the No Child Left Behind Act was passed. This law required annual standardized testing in all schools nationwide to measure student progress from year to year and compare it from school to school, state to state. And this was a way for the government to really hold schools accountable in the education they were providing. Most recently, the Every Student Succeeds Act was passed in 2015. And this act reduced some of the state testing or standardized testing requirements, but it still mandated statewide testing for students from 3rd grade to 8th grade. And then also, once again, in high school, some standardized testing was required. For example, once again, we have in New York State, our New York State state tests begin in 3rd grade. And I don't know how it was for some of you, but they are optional. Your parent can write a note and opt you out of these exams, and the school is not held at fault for that in any way. So if a parent feels that it is in the best interest of their child to not take these state exams and not have this data recorded on them, a parent can so choose. But the main reason we do have these exams is to provide that objective comparison of student performance across different schools, different districts, and different states. Unlike classroom grades by a teacher, like a term grade, which can easily be influenced by factors like participation, effort, or perceived effort, in fact, actually, or like a teacher's personal judgment, standardized assessments are testing purely a student's knowledge and ability to answer questions about a certain topic and a certain content area. Research in the educational measurement issues in practice found that teachers often included this non-academic criteria, such as behavior, too, when grading students. And while this approach can be beneficial for understanding overall student engagement, it can also lead to grade inflation or deflation and oftentimes inconsistencies. A teacher has their own personal biases and can not grade fairly when they're not taking just academics into consideration. When a teacher is looking at a student's attendance, behavior, attitude towards the class, their perceived effort that's put in, a student who can perform and does well academically might have their grades hindered in that aspect, where a student who's performing not as well academically but is putting in a lot of effort, who maybe is that popular social butterfly who has made connections with that teacher, their grade might reflect in a higher manner, which is not really fair to the students when the point of these grades is to reflect their academic achievement and progress, which standardized tests do, because it removes those subjective elements from grading and provides that uniform measure of academic achievement. Another thing, though, is that for parents, standardized tests can serve as almost a reality check, but also create a bridge between parents, teachers, and students. The Thomas B. Fordham Institute reported that many parents overestimate their child's academic abilities. Additionally, data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress indicated that only about a third of U.S. students were proficient in both reading and math. And the data to support that statistics came from standardized testing. So the National Assessment of Educational Progress is essentially the country's report card. Like, it's their grades based on data taken from standardized testing, where you can see how well students are actually doing. And it was found that students are not doing well overall. And these standardized testing results can provide concrete data that helps bridge the gap between perception and reality and allow parents and teachers to work together to make informed decisions about students and their education. It can act as a progress tracker for individual students in an objective way, and also really hold teachers and administration accountable for the supports that they're implementing for students. If a student scored low on a test, a standardized assessment, and it was the student's supports were put in place for that student, and their academic progress flourished, and they were scoring higher on these standardized tests, you would say that that support is working. If their growth was stagnant or even declined, chances are that support's not working, and you can really hold schools accountable for what they're doing to change that and ensure that all students are progressing forward in a manner that's appropriate for each student. And it's a practical way of doing it. So beyond measuring student performance, standardized testing plays a critical role in educational policy and also funding. According to a Stanford professor, Caroline M. Hexby, standardized tests offer cost-effective, efficient ways of collecting valuable data on student achievement. And these assessments don't take up excessive class time, which makes it a good tool for evaluating these educational systems. For example, Title IX, funding for programs like that, which is a program that supports low-income schools. The allocation of money and funding is often based on data provided by standardized test results. A report from the Center on Education Policy highlights how these tests help policymakers identify schools and districts in need of additional support, ensuring that those resources are distributed where they're needed most, where we're seeing gaps in students' education. Data-driven decision-making occurs when educators, both administrators and teachers alike, use student data to influence many aspects of education, including curriculum mapping, intervention strategies, and school-wide policies. And a lot of these are going to fall short without that funding. But we need the data to tell us exactly where we're falling short and where we need those helps and where we need to adjust the curriculum and the intervention and the funding and other policies in that manner. This next part is really what took me by surprise, and not something I was expecting when I was doing my research. So it was found that testing can actually help you learn. Many people view standardized testing as just another requirement or another stressor in their day-to-day academic experience, but research is suggesting that taking tests actually helps students retain information. A study published in Psychological Science found that students who were regularly tested on material retained significantly more information over time compared to those who only reviewed notes or studied very passively. This phenomenon was called as the testing effect, where it strengthened neural connections in the brain and improved long-term memory. In this study, they researched classrooms that were following a specific layout of their curriculum, where they studied content, reviewed and had a quiz, and they repeated that cycle a couple of times, and then they reviewed and had a unit exam prior to, at the end of a marking period or year, having a standardized district-wide or state assessment. In this case, students were reviewing more than once, multiple times, 2 to 3 times prior to taking that final assessment, and it showed that they were remembering and retaining that information because not only were they just reviewing it, they were being assessed. They got clear feedback on how well they learned that information. And especially quizzes and unit exams, that information comes back quickly and can be used to help students assess their effectiveness. In fact, a comprehensive study by education researcher Richard P. Phelps reviewed 100 years of research on testing, and he found that 93% of studies concluded that testing had a positive impact on student achievement. Another study demonstrated that students who repeatedly tested a material had better long-term retention than those who just simply reread that material. Standardized testing does not just enhance memorization, though. It also promotes critical thinking skills. The American Psychological Association emphasizes that assessments requiring students to analyze, apply, and synthesize information help develop problem-solving skills and time management skills that are valuable well beyond the classroom. These skills that they're developing are useful in so many other aspects, and because students are not just memorizing content and curriculum, they are being assessed on their ability to interpret and apply those information about content, which they can take on into the future and use multiple ways and help them be successful. So, of course, standardized testing is not perfect. One major criticism is that it places a lot of pressure on students, and while that's a valid concern, a study suggested that regular exposure to testing can reduce anxiety over time, and when students engage in frequent low-stake assessments, they become more comfortable with testing, leading to decreased stress during high-stakes exams such as college AccuPlacer exams or other things that might really rely heavily on their ability to perform well. Another argument is often that standardized testing narrows the curriculum and forces teachers to teach the test. However, research from the National Bureau of Economic Research indicated that well-designed standardized tests encourage students to focus on essential academic skills like reading, writing, and math. Instead of limiting education and curriculum, the tests are reinforcing foundational knowledge that is critical for future success. These skills are necessary in all aspects of life, and the students are learning them and being assessed on them young, and it provides opportunities for them to continue growing and continue receiving that education. Additionally, the Thomas B. Fordham Institute stated that standardized tests are the most reliable measures we have for gauging performance at school levels. And it sheds light on systemic inequalities, and it holds schools accountable for their students' academic performances in these areas. It provides that objective data for schools to really rely on and assess their demographics and capability levels. I know that this is probably not the most exciting topic, but it's definitely a controversial one, and I think there's a lot of food for thought, especially in how it's helpful to students and not just helpful to policymakers and funding, that it's benefiting the actual learners that we're going to be working with, and it's not just beneficial for schools to access that information. I think it's clear that standardized tests serve a very important purpose, that they provide fair and objective ways to measure student performance, to help parents and teachers track academic progress of individual students, and that they play a key role in decisions about school funding and resources and policies. And again, research is showing that testing helps students learn and retain information more effectively, that they're learning and building skills that they're going to need in their future. So rather than viewing standardized tests as just another hurdle and just another part of education and teaching, just something else we have to do, I think we maybe need to look at it as a tool, and something that's valuable and can really enhance education for students, teachers, and administration alike. Thank you.